industry on parade. A pictorial review of events in business and industry, produced each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
From this factory in Newark, New Jersey, on its way to becoming world center of the harmonica industry, pours a flood of musical instruments for children. They make not only mouth organs here at the Magnus Harmonica Corporation, but also key monicas, a sort of combination of harmonica, accordion, and clarinet. Concertinas, accordions, electric organs, and others on the way, all made of plastic. And just as important, every day this company produces something else. New confirmation of faith in America, held from the start by the founder of the firm, a Norwegian immigrant named Finn Håkon Magnus. Here, working on one of his newest instruments, a plastic bagpipe, is the man who set out to buy a harmonica one day in 1941, only to find they were all made in Germany and Japan and couldn't be had because of the war. Magnus had always believed there wasn't anything that couldn't be made in the USA. He set out to prove it and succeeded. Now, with his chief designer, he reduces the bagpipe to blueprints and gets the wheels rolling that will start the bagpipe into production. Manipulating the chanter, or melody-making part of the bagpipe, is much simpler with the Magnus bagpipe. That's because the single reed of the Scottish version is replaced by plastic plate, here about to be molded, a plate containing 8 reeds, or 1 complete octave. Magnus has worked out methods of molding plastic to a tolerance of 1/10,000th of an inch, which makes it possible to produce plastic reeds that are in perfect tune and will stay in tune for good. A number of the reed plates are molded at one time. The other parts of the bagpipe, chanter, drones, drone bass, and blower, are molded the same way, although production of these need not be such a precise operation as the making of reed plates. While it takes about 7 years to learn to play the old-fashioned bagpipe, you can learn to play the one we're about to see assembled in a matter of minutes. Use of plastics and advanced industrial techniques have similarly cut the time and cost of manufacturing the instrument. The parts are joined permanently with a special plastic glue. Here we see the assembly of the drone that gives the bagpipe its characteristic wail. The reeds for the drone are molded right along with those for the chanter, but they work independently whenever the bag is pressed. The drone base is attached to the bag, which is also plastic, made of vinylite sheeting. The drone pipes are joined. The lady here setting the drone pipes in place, this maker of bagpipes, is named, believe it or not, Annie Laurie. The chanter is assembled. Inside it goes the reed plate, with a reed for each of the 8 notes just inside each of the 8 holes. And thus are made the instruments that bring music to the young, and a smile of satisfaction to the face of a man who crossed an ocean to prove this is the land of opportunity.
It's estimated that by the end of this year, America's expanded industrial machine will be able to produce nearly twice as much goods as it could when World War II started in 1939. Now, this tremendous increase in productive capacity was not the accomplishment of big, medium, or small business alone. They all did it together. It takes many thousands of small business concerns to supply one large company with essential goods and services. and it often requires many large businesses to supply the needs of one small concern. In America, large and small businesses work together for the benefit of all.
Deep in the woods of Michigan, in the shops of Habitant, maker of knotty pine furniture, a tradition that came from the early inhabitants of America is being maintained and embellished. For here, expert woodworkers fashion furniture from the type of wood that was far and away the outstanding favorite of our ancestors, the white pine. But though they used the material of the pioneers, the men of Habitant turned to something more modern in the way of tools. And in addition to using methods our forefathers never even dreamed of, Habitat also has developed and expanded upon the simple, rugged, comfortable lines favored in those early days. Not that the designs have gone modern, they've simply been modified to incorporate features that harmonize with the present-day requirements of the American home. But one thing remains the same. Nothing is allowed to cover the beauty of the natural wood. Here, they're working on a type of stool known as a captain's chair. It's one of Habitant's most popular models. This is a coffee table with a unique center leg. Jim Van Cleek gets real satisfaction out of turning the trees of the forest into useful products. This is an end table. An endless belt sander smooths off the top of a dinette table. No stain or varnish is used, just clear lacquer to protect the surface. Now we see one of the ways in which the furniture fashions of the early days have been modified. There was little in the way of upholstery then, but few pieces of furniture would be considered acceptable without it today. However, Habitant's designer makes sure the fabrics and the contours of the upholstery retain the simple beauty and informality of the knotty pine. And here we have a room styled by our forebears, but a lot has been added to it.
At the close of World War II, thanks to an amazing product called cocoon, America's armed forces were able to store away thousands of ships, planes, and tanks that since have stood us in very good stead indeed. The weapons of war were sealed up like a silkworm in a cocoon, safe from rust, mildew, mold, and the other ravages of time and the elements. When war broke out in Korea, the equipment was ready for immediate action. Bags of chemicals go into the cocoon with the weapon to absorb moisture and prevent the natural enemies of metal from getting in their licks. To find out more about this unique mothballing technique, let's call on the main plant of R.M. Hollingshead Corporation at Camden, New Jersey. The chemists of this long-established firm help develop a liquid plastic that becomes a solid simply by contact with the air. Here's a piece of machinery being prepared for shipment, an example of the biggest industrial use for the cocooning technique. Cellophane tape is used to construct a framework. Over this goes a coarse web coating to bridge the gaps between the tape. Here's the finish coat that will make the airtight, moisture-proof outer skin of the cocoon. Since the skin is suspended away from the contents of the cocoon, when it's ripped away, the machine or whatever is ready for use at once. Meanwhile, the Hollingshead research staff works intensively on new formulas to bring the benefits of cocooning to still other phases of American life. They stretch the plastic skin, subject it to conditions of extreme heat, cold, and simulated sunlight, and otherwise seek ways of increasing its toughness and durability. It's the same sort of dogged research that has kept them in the business of supplying industry with chemical products for more than 60 years. For big customers like Uncle Sam, the cocoon liquid is shipped in 50-gallon drums. But to take care of the dozens of small-scale uses discovered for this unusual product in homes and shops, it's also put up in much smaller containers. But of all its uses, the one America still has greatest reason to be thankful for is that of keeping intact our tremendous war machine. For with the communists obviously determined to continue their recurring outrages against humanity, who can say how many times in the years ahead we'll have to put our ships and planes away in mothballs only to take them out again when some new threat arises.
Every home, every farm, every factory, and every office in America must fight to lick our greatest domestic enemy, inflation. Unless we stop it now, we'll wind up defeated, broke, and helpless, as individuals, as families, as a nation. We can lick inflation if every American avoids borrowing to buy unnecessary things, if we save all the money we can and avoid wasting materials, if all of us work with greater efficiency, produce more, and thus help hold down costs and prices, and if we'll be willing to pay necessary government costs as we go.
Here's a pleasant domestic scene that might be enacted in a Chicago apartment, a California cottage, or a Texas ranch. But it's actually going on in none of those places. For thanks to the business Pop's in, the William Green family are at home on a barge anchored in New York Harbor. Bill Green runs a floating filling station for fishing boats, yachts, and cabin cruisers. He and the rest of the family also carry on a lucrative sideline in food and refreshments. Five-year-old Sherry loves to help out and finds the cool waters of the harbor much more fun than the hot city pavements. The Greens never have a chance to get lonely, for customers are always anxious to chat about their unusual nautical life. When the workday's over, there's fishing or swimming, right off the front doorstep. This is really a case of combining business with pleasure. Industry on Parade. A pictorial review of events in business and industry, produced each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
Industry on Parade goes sightseeing at one of the most popular meccas for tourists in the world. But not all the water of the Niagara River tumbles over the world-famed precipice. Some of it is diverted by means of tunnel and canal through and under the city of Niagara Falls to the plant of the Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation. There to have the energy it contains transformed into electricity before it rejoins the stream half a mile below the falls. Water that flows through Niagara Mohawk Shoalkopf Station must be free of ice and debris that could wreck the machinery. So a number of precautions are taken to keep the water as clear as possible. A floating boom at the entrance to the hydraulic canal is the first barrier to the unwanted flotsam. Forerunner of this wide canal was a tiny mill race, 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep, that first utilized the power of the river to turn a water wheel for a sawmill late in the 18th century. Now, at the rate of thousands of tons an hour, the water rushes into an area called the forebay, where turbulence breaks up ice formations and brings trash to the surface. From here, the torrent flows into the gatehouse building, where it'll be diverted to the various turbines. After a final screening, the water drops through huge rock and steel tubes to the powerhouse, 200 feet below, where its gigantic force spins generators with a capacity as high as 70,000 horsepower. These latest type vertical generators are mounted on top of the huge water wheels through which the stream passes. A little hard to imagine water having the power to turn such massive machines, but here we see it happening. Here's a view from below. The big water wheels can't be filmed in action, of course, but here's a spare that shows their size. A great variety of expensive equipment like this must be maintained to bring to America the electric power it requires in ever-increasing quantities. The station, built of rock, blends with its natural surroundings so as not to detract from the beauty of the falls and the gorge. In the control room, through an interconnected distribution system, power is fed into a statewide network, tied in also with Canada, the New England states, and the Pennsylvania-New Jersey pool. So the efficient operations of a firm like Niagara Mohawk benefit not only its own customers, but this whole section of the country. And under the terms of a new treaty with Canada, the privately owned electric companies of the state are proposing to develop over 1 million additional kilowatts, without diminishing the attractions for tourists of an outstanding American landmark.
It takes a lot of money these days to start a business and to keep it going. Most people naturally can't afford to buy tools needed for modern mass production, even in small companies. But millions of people, through the investment of their savings in stocks and bonds, can and do buy them. Recent studies indicate that it takes an average investment of more than $11,000 to create a job. Investment in building space, supplies, power tools, and all the other things a factory workman needs. Today, there are 14 million shareholders in American business and industrial corporations.
Here's a Philadelphia firm that does for corporations, municipalities, and foreign governments what the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing does for Uncle Sam. It prints money. Not just currency, but other negotiable instruments as well, like stocks, bonds, and stamps, which require fully as much protection against alteration, duplication, and the ravages of time. Here, 2 officers of the Security Banknote Company make sure a model for a new security conforms to rigid specifications required by the New York Stock Exchange, primarily to protect against counterfeiting. When approved, the document is engraved in steel. This geometric lathe cuts an intricate combination of loops and crisscrossing lines. 600 separate adjustments make possible a virtually unlimited number of patterns and erect an important obstacle to the counterfeiter. But it's the skill of the hand engravers who add portraits, titles, vignettes, seals, and text that make duplication virtually impossible. By a process called siderography, all the hand-engraved parts of the security are merged into a composite whole on steel that will then be hardened. Throughout the plant, the greatest security precautions are taken. Plates and engravings, for example, are kept behind triple locked doors when not actually in use. And every sheet of the special white rag paper used here must be accounted for at all times. Special rotary printing machines designed and built by Security Banknote engineers assure the flawless perfection required in currency and securities for protection, permanence, and dignity. To double-check against any possible imperfection, every sheet is examined and re-examined. If a line is not clear and sharp, a color not uniform, or there is any other fault, however slight, the spoiled sheet will be burned in the company's crematory. Just a few of the factors that have built a company's reputation for skill and integrity.
Arriving by tank car at the Detroit plant of Reichhold Chemicals Incorporated are some of the raw materials that will turn up a few weeks or months from now in the form of paint on your walls, ink on your newspaper, or insulation for your attic. In hundreds of products, chemicals serve mankind in ways undreamed of 50 or even 15 years ago. Working constantly to develop new applications for elements that went unused for centuries, Reichhold scientists perfect not just substitutes for materials already in use, but chemicals to perform jobs that previously went undone, as with plastics and synthetics. They search constantly for new accomplishments in the textile, paint, paper, and other industries through utilization of synthetic resins that already have revolutionized many industrial processes. For example, automobile paint jobs once took 3 weeks to dry. Reichhold synthetic resins have reduced the operation to a matter of minutes. Here in pilot plants that are exact miniatures of paper factories or textile finishing plants, developments almost as sensational are a matter of course. Manufacture of synthetic resins is a complex business of mixing and blending under carefully controlled conditions of heat and pressure. Here, their liquid ingredients are fed into the cooker. All the manufacturing techniques were worked out in small-scale pilot plants in the lab, where the bugs were eliminated. The resin finally emerges from the maze of pipes and kettles as it passes through the filter press, ready for shipment. For crush-proofing cloth, giving paper strength when wet, gluing plywoods, lending quick-drying qualities to surface coatings, synthetic resin has by no means exhausted all its applications even yet. Just one of the discoveries that justify Reichhold's slogan, "Creative Chemistry, your partner in progress."
American industry is made up of more than 300,000 manufacturing companies. These range from the one-man shop to corporations employing more than 500,000. Industry today employs some 16 million employees to produce all the things we Americans need at home and for defense. While we are devoting billions for defense, the government may call on a large manufacturer to assemble the finished plane, ship, or tank. But it takes hundreds and sometimes thousands of small businesses to supply the component parts before the finished product rolls off the production line. The role of small and large business is vital to keep our nation free and strong.
Latest thing to set the nation's small fry to reaching. Their favorite movie, television, and comic strip heroes combined with their favorite confection. The likenesses of Howdy Doody and Hop-Along Cassidy embossed on cookies. What ardent fan could resist? At the Elizabeth, New Jersey plant of Burry Biscuit Corporation, production of the character cookies, as they're called, started out as a very small sideline to its regular line of baked goods. But response from the younger set was so immediate and enthusiastic that the new product has brought on a large-scale expansion of the plant's facilities. While ingredients like eggs are measured by the gallon rather than the cup, the recipes are followed precisely. Even in dealing with such large quantities, the same standards of purity are maintained as in the kitchen of the most meticulous housewife. From the mixer, the dough goes to cutting machines on the floor below, where it'll be shaped into cookies and stamped with the features of any of a half dozen or more of the characters so popular with children these days. From this point on, the cutting, stamping, and baking of the cookies becomes automatic as they progress in military order toward one of the 6 great ovens in operation here. Into the oven they go, to emerge minutes later, each one baked just right, just like all the others. Smoothly functioning production lines like this are one big reason why companies like Burry, using only the finest ingredients, can market cookies at less than it would cost Mother to bake them herself. With flour, sugar, milk, and the rest bought in great quantities, with machines designed to do the heavy work, with never a waste motion, our food processing industry is bound to do a better, less costly job than we could do individually. Packaging and shipment of the character cookies is another revelation in high-speed manufacturing techniques. But Mary doesn't care how her Girl Scout cookies got into her hands. What she and a few million other members of her generation do know is how to put them to good use. Thus do Howdy Doody, Hop Along, and Bugs Bunny become staples of the diet. Industry on Parade. A pictorial review of events in business and industry, produced each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
From the Navy to the Radio Corporation of America, an urgent order. Make us a communications console to keep all the ships of a task force in constant, immediate contact with each other. From RCA to Don Mossman, a small businessman of Joliet, Illinois, another order for a switch to serve as the heart of such a communications console. And Mossman also had to send out a hurry call to the Capital Machine Company, another small firm in Danbury, Connecticut, which had just the right machines and skilled personnel to produce the 889 parts of that intricate but very compact switch. "18 of Capital's 25 employees were assigned to production of a push-button switch of a type never even imagined before Mossman turned his engineering skill to the problem. Meanwhile, the prime contractor had farmed out to 118 other companies, some of them large, but most small ones like this, the job of turning out other parts for the fabulous new communications device. The people at Capital, experienced chiefly in the manufacture of spray baking equipment, adapted readily to this new assignment, carried out under Mossman's personal direction. In 4 weeks, they were able to report, the first model is ready for testing by the Navy. As the various parts, like Mossman's switch, arrived from all parts of the country, they were fitted together into a console completed at 3 o'clock one morning and delivered to the Navy at 7. By the next day, the Navy had given its approval, and production got underway at all those 121 companies participating in the contract. Wherever our Navy operates, it does so more effectively with the latest piece of equipment developed and produced by American industries large and small, all pulling together.
In America, nearly all of us are investors. When we save money, we invest it one way or another. We may invest it directly in a business of our own or buy stocks or bonds. We may deposit it in a bank or buy building and loan shares or a life insurance policy. And these agencies, in turn, invest our savings for us. Today, there are more than 14 million stockholders in American industry. Then there are the 70 million who have savings accounts and the 83 million who hold insurance policies. Added up, it means nearly every family has a stake in this nation's investments.
Birthday, happiest day of the year for those who can't remember more than a few. And part of the reason for the excitement and happiness are the birthday greeting cards that come from friends and relatives everywhere, all addressed and delivered to one very special little girl. Industry on Parade visits Kansas City and the plant of the Hallmark Greeting Card Company to learn a little about what goes into the familiar cards sent and received so pleasantly, not only on birthdays, but all the other occasions when a person likes to be remembered. Here, sentiment writers dream up the friendly, thoughtful messages, while artists by the score paint, draw, and letter the designs produced in never-ending variety the year around. These are the people who have much to do with gradual changes in the appearance of Santa Claus over the years. And don't think a lot of attention isn't given every hair in the old gentleman's beard. Where possible, the artists paint from real life for authenticity. The work of fine artists like Grandma Moses, Norman Rockwell, Winston Churchill, and many others are also used, especially on Christmas cards, as are reproductions of 12th century illuminated manuscripts. Extensive files of the cards put out in former years are maintained to avoid duplication among the 5,000 new cards Hallmark produces each year. In view of all the care and skill that go into the design for the cards, the firm utilizes the latest techniques in the graphic arts field to create perfect reproductions. Multicolor photographs are taken from which plates are made for each of the various colors. Here we see one such plate being retouched. Many cards receive special perforations and other characteristics by die cutting. On the color presses, the design is printed on the extra fine paper that adds its own touch of beauty to the finished product. The colors are checked constantly to make sure they're in exact register. Folding and insertion is done by hand. Valentines compose a large part of Hallmark's business. For more and more occasions, Americans turn to greeting cards to express the thoughts that they'd express in person if they could. And for sentiments in a lighter vein, the Squeeze 'em novelty cards provide both action and amusement. This model will be put in production if it meets with the approval of a committee presided over by Joyce C. Hall, president of the company he founded 40 years ago. The artwork and verses of every new card turned out must get the okay of this committee first. A lot of craftsmanship and artistry have gone into these familiar tokens of love, sympathy, or congratulation.
For beauty and fast conductivity of heat, the latest thing is cooking utensils made of stainless steel with an inner layer of copper. Here's a combustion liner for a jet engine made of a similar metal sandwich with great strength and the ability to draw off tremendous heat in a hurry. We're at the American Clad Metals Company plant in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, to learn how the metals are sandwiched together so permanently. This is a piece of carbon steel that will be encased in sheets of an alloy that's 90% copper. Part of the secret of getting steel and copper to adhere to each other is to make sure they're absolutely clean. Grinding helps accomplish that. The steel and copper sandwich is formed. This is just one of many combinations of dissimilar metals that American Clad Metals joins together in order to obtain all the best properties of each metal. Tack welded at the corners to hold them in place temporarily, the layers are forced together under tremendous pressure to expel any air that might be present. An air bubble, of course, would prevent the complete bonding of the components. Then, after the edges have been welded all around and the metal has been heated in a furnace, it starts through the roughing mill that both bonds the different layers together and reduces their thickness. The action is repeated over and over. Each trip through the rollers makes it a little thinner, a little longer. We don't see exactly how much longer the metal has become, because as it grows, they keep cutting it into shorter lengths for easier handling. After cooling, the plates go right back into another furnace, from which they emerge red hot and ready for the finishing mill, where they are reduced to precisely the right thickness. These plates will become cups from which the jackets for bullets will be drawn. Formerly, such jackets were made almost entirely of copper. Using clad metals, only a fraction of the jacket is copper, which means tremendous savings in this precious metal, not to mention savings in dollars. With scale that formed during the hot rolling operation removed in the pickling bath, the plates move on to be rinsed in hot water that washes off the sulfuric acid solution used for pickling. Now the metal is rolled still further on a cold reduction mill that imparts a smoother surface to the metals. Then there'll be a heat treatment, another rolling, and finally they're ready to be formed into little cups. The double action press simultaneously stamps out 2 round discs and shapes them into cups. From here, the cups will be shipped to arms companies to be processed into the finished jackets for bullets. But first, they must be inspected to make sure they conform to ordnance specifications, dimensions measured in thousandths of an inch. Though the rest of the job is not done here, displays of the finished product showing how the cup is further shaped after it leaves American Clad Metals help remind employees of the ultimate purpose of their work. In this time of crisis, while need for strong national defense continues, mighty important work it is.
As Americans, we have faith in the ability of men and women to govern themselves. We believe that after all sides of a question have been heard, the decision of the majority is, for the most part, the voice of wisdom. There may be times when we are led astray by emotion or false prophecies, but in the long run, the average opinion of all of the people is more reliable than that of an individual or a small group of individuals. If we are to serve the cause of democracy, we must reaffirm and strengthen our confidence in the individual citizen, which really means confidence in ourselves.
Here's a product currently enjoying tremendous favor with Americans young and old, popcorn. And it's especially popular in this Duluth family because the head of the house, Dick Anthony, in addition to his job at a local radio station, is branching out in a business of his own, the popcorn business. In his basement headquarters, Dick transforms a 100-pound bag of unpopped corn into 120 pounds of the fluffy white confection. The difference being, of course, the salt and vegetable oil. As in any one-man company, Dick is his own production man, salesman, and distributor. He finds that being the proprietor of a business is a lot more demanding than working for someone else on an 8-hour-a-day schedule. However, he also finds that it has its own particular satisfactions. Sometimes the rest of the family helps him with the popping, but the trouble with the kids is that they're their own best customers. In machines he has set up in stores and shops around town, Dick maintains a constant supply of fresh popcorn, kept warm by a light bulb in the top. He's convinced all food handling equipment must be kept bright and clean at all times. Collections, which are divided with the owner of the store in which the machine is located, are only part of the reward for a man who enjoys being on his own. The rest comes in the pleasure it gives a man to see a project he developed all by himself flourish and grow with a steadily widening circle of satisfied customers.